on home. My headphones are caught. My headphones are caught. I hate that. My headphones are caught. What's happening, Boot Junkies? Mike Delgadio here, back with another video on home studio setup for voiceover. And today, we're going to walk through the features of the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 audio interface. So I'm editing and I realize I totally forgot to say thank you to Richard for loaning us, a fellow Boot Junkie, loaning us his Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. Richard, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. If you're new to voiceover, or if you're new to audio, what's an interface? Well, put simply, an interface is a little box that allows you to connect an XLR-based microphone, either condenser or dynamic. It allows you to connect it to your computer. So it's a device that sits in between that will take the analog signal from your microphone, turn it into a digital signal, and send it over to whatever piece of software you have on your computer. That's your digital audio workstation, be it Audacity, Reaper, Pro Tools, Ableton, Nuendo, Cubase, Studio One, any of those. It will allow you to take this analog signal, turn it into a digital signal. And in that box, for our purposes, there are two features. There's the digital to analog converter that changes that signal from one format to the other. And the other part is the preamplifier. Microphones as a whole have a very, very, very weak signal. Imagine this. My voice is vibrating the air, which is vibrating an extremely thin membrane. And that extremely thin membrane vibrates and creates a minuscule amount of electricity, that transfer. And so that signal is, it's ever so incy-wincy, and it goes over to the computer. But the interface preamplifies the signal into something that the DAW can work with, the preamplifier. And how good that preamplifier is works with how good your microphone is to try and get a nice clean signal over to your computer. So an interface, preamplifier, analog to digital converter. And there's other stuff that it does. It's got, depending on what you choose, there are other features to it. So we're going to look at a good entry-level voiceover, certainly for voiceover, a good entry-level mic interface. So that if you're ready to start recording audiobooks and things like that, the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. So I have it right down here. So we're going to take a look at the features that it has and just sort of give you a basic walkthrough so you can decide if, that looks like the thing that I'll need. Okay, let's take a look. The 2i2 has two channels, channel 1 and channel 2. So you can hook two microphones to it. You could hook two instruments to it. You could hook a microphone and an instrument to it. So if you wanted to also make music and you had a guitar, you could plug a guitar into channel 1 and your mic into channel 2. Those jacks are what they call combo jacks. So it'll allow you to put in an XLR cable or a tip, like a tip sleeve, like a guitar cable. You could just plug that right into the center. So it will take both. Below it, there's a switch that says line or instrument. So depending on what you're plugging in, whether it's a microphone or an instrument like a guitar, you choose between the two. Because the instruments have a different signal level than the microphones do, and you don't want to overload or change your preamp, anything like that. So just, if it's an instrument, use the instrument. If it's a microphone, if it's a microphone or an external piece of equipment like a signal processor, a DBX286 or anything like that, then you'd set it online because it's generally a higher signal than what the instrument will generate. That's my understanding. Okay, so you have two. Each one of them has their own gain knob. Gain refers to how loud the signal is. It will amplify the signal to send it on to the next item in the chain. So in this case, it receives the signal from the microphone, and the gain knob says how much louder you want to make that signal before it goes on to the next step. In this case, the next step might be the computer. The next step might be some other piece of equipment or anything like that. So you are setting the gain. And for us in voiceover, generally the next stage is the computer, and it's going to end up on disk somewhere. So you want to do it without clipping. And helpfully, the Scarlett gives you some feedback to let you know if you are clipping or not. So as there is signal coming in, the light illuminates and it turns green that says, hey, we're loud enough to get signal. Now, if you do something too loud, I'll snap my fingers, it turns red. So the signal was too loud and it clipped. So if you are too loud, if you need to scream into this microphone or something like that, and you see it turn red, that means you've clipped and you've overloaded the signal. So that's a bit of feedback. So then you would adjust the gain downward. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I hope it does. So there is a visual feedback that says if your signal is okay and not clipping. If it does clip, it turns red. Perfect. Next to that, there's a red light here, and it's actually a button. And below it, it says 48V. And that is whether or not your microphone needs phantom power, which is often 48 volts. It can be 24 volts. It's 24 or 48 volts of power. Some microphones, these condenser microphones specifically, they generally require 48 volts of power in order to get the signal. Now, if it's a dynamic microphone, you don't need the 48 volts of power. It's really just for condenser microphones. And that light is also a button. I'm not going to press it because it will turn my microphone off, but if you press it, it turns the light off. The phantom power is cut. And it does activate for both channels. Now, it only activates it for the XLR, the 3-pin. So if you have a guitar plugged into it, you don't have to worry about electrocuting your guitar if you're turning on phantom power, because the phantom power won't go down the center, if that makes sense. I hope it does. So only the XLR's type jack will do it. But that means you'd have to be careful, because it applies phantom power to both, that if you had a dynamic microphone or a ribbon microphone that couldn't handle that kind of power, you would have to be careful and not apply. You wouldn't be able to apply phantom power to either channel, because it does do both. You energize both ports at the same time. Okay. Next to that is a switch that says direct monitor. Direct monitor allows you to have very, very low latency audio in your headphones as you're live, as you're talking into the microphone. So right now I have it set on because I want to hear myself in my headphones. If you don't have that turned on, then it's not going to send audio back to your headphones unless your computer is sending audio back. Now, that round trip from the microphone to the interface, to the computer, to whatever the processing the computer's doing, back to the interface, back to your headphones, that can take a while. It might take a few milliseconds to do. And that would mean in your headphones, it would sound delayed. It's called latency. And you want to not have latency, especially when you're talking into the microphone, because latency can affect your delivery. Especially if the latency is long, it tends to make you speak more slowly as you're waiting for your headphones to catch up. It's just, if you've ever been on a phone, like on your cell phone, and you talk and there's an echo and it makes you really wait and slow down and it makes it hard to concentrate, latency can affect your performance. So the Scarlett, helpfully, allows you to turn direct monitoring on, and that way the signal never leaves this box. It goes right from the jack out to the headphones, and you can hear it with no latency. Perfection. That's what we want generally for voiceover. Next to that is the monitor button or knob. So the monitor is like the great big volume knob. So if you have speakers that plug into the back, there are two tip ring sleeve, which is like a headphone jack, like this. Let me pull this out here, like that. So that's a tip ring sleeve that you can plug into. So if you have powered monitors, there are two jacks on the back that allow you to plug in a left, right. Sorry, I'm bumping everything in here. It's extremely crowded in the booth right now. Sorry about that. So the monitor button, or the monitor knob, allows you to adjust the volume that's going to come out of your speakers. So when you're listening back, you can adjust the volume. It's a great big knob for that. If there's one complaint I have with this device, it's that. A big knob like that is not at all unusual. What it desperately needs, for my opinion, is it needs a mute. It needs a mute button so that you can shut the monitors off. Why? Well, when I'm speaking into the microphone, it's coming out the monitors. So that in a situation where you have a talent in a booth and you've got an engineer who wants to hear it, if he's in the other room, the monitors should be able to play. But there's no way to turn it off. So if you're acting alone, me in my booth with my monitors and everything like that, it means I always have to turn the monitors down in order to prevent that signal from coming back into the mic and causing an echo and potentially causing feedback. But certainly for me, I do a lot of work at my booth, and I like my monitor set at a specific volume because it's the volume. I want to always edit at the same volume. That way I'm not trying to make things louder and softer based on what I hear. I always want my monitors to sort of be at that nice set volume. The manual says you got to turn it down and then turn it back up, which I wish was different. I wish it was different because I want to always make sure I've got that. I want that button to be essential, or that knob to be set and forget for most circumstances. So what I would end up doing is I'd probably paint a little dot or something, or have a little arrow that points. This is always got to turn it back up to here. It would be so much easier if there was just a button that said mute or cut or whatever. Anyway, that's the one thing. Lastly, there is the headphone section. So right now my headphones are plugged into the front of the Scarlett, and I can hear it, but you notice I've got my volume turned all the way up. That's my second issue with this. And it's not really an issue with the Scarlett. It's probably the combination of these headphones and that device. I think these headphones are of a higher impedance, which means that if the headphone amplifier doesn't have much gusto, it never really gets loud enough in your headphones. So even though I have this turned all the way up, it's really not that loud in my headphones. So you need to make sure that you have monitoring headphones that have a low impedance. So that would be, it's measured in ohms. 600 ohms is a really high impedance. 60 ohms, a low impedance. Sometimes there's a 250 and 300. I think for this particular device, you would benefit by having a lower impedance, a higher sensitivity set of monitoring headphones. And that's something you'd want to look at. If you had high impedance headphones, you would need probably another amplifier that this ran to, so that you could get enough volume. It's one thing. That's one thing about it. But if it's a minor quibble. Like I can certainly hear myself. It's just that I don't like to have it turned all the way up. I'd like to have it halfway up so that I could adjust as needed. But all the way up, it feels loud, even though it's not particularly loud in my headphones. Okay, that is the front of the Scarlett. On the back, I'm gonna have to get it in B-roll. On the back, there are two jacks, as I mentioned, and that's to plug in external studio monitors. So they are 1/4-inch jacks. They're not RCA jacks, and they're not bare wire like you'd find on the back of your receiver or something like that. They're 1/4-inch jacks, and typically you would send it to a powered monitor. Otherwise, you'll need adapters or something to convert the 1/4-inch jack to either an RCA or bare wire in order to get it into a home receiver or some other kind of amplifier. And last thing on the back, there is a USB that allows you to just plug it into the USB port. And there you have it. I like the Focusrite Scarlett. I do recommend it for people if they're creating a basic setup. This is very much a basic setup that I would recommend to an aspiring voice actor who wanted to work for the next 5 years and not need an equipment upgrade. This is a Rode NT1, not the NT1A. I like the NT1 personally. A little bit better than the NT1A if we're talking Rode microphones. So a Rode NT1 and a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, an XLR cable, a set of headphones, and acoustic treatment. And you're off to the races. A great entry level, but can last setup. So now go get yourself a microphone and an interface. Get it all hooked up so that you can get into your booth, even if your booth is your bedroom closet or your coat closet out in the front of your house, but get in a booth somewhere and record something amazing. Thanks. We'll talk to you next time.